When Doom hit the PC market in late 1993, you can bet I wanted to play it. I had no real experience with the technology, however, and everything I had ever seen at retail had been well beyond my understanding and financial means. In those days, it fell to console ports to satisfy my curiosity, so I'd need to wait almost an entire year to finally play it. That version ended up being the 32X release in November of 1994. It actually launched with the hardware and was heavily pushed in both print and television advertisements. Sega knew that Doom had been huge, and its name carried some serious sales potential. Unfortunately, in order to make that November release date, Sega had to cut a load of corners and rush the product to market. These shortcomings are often highlighted in retrospectives and reviews, and they certainly will matter to those of you thinking about playing it today. But in 1994, I had never played Doom before, and this was my very first taste of it. I had no clue what was missing, and that ignorance led me to enjoy it quite a bit. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at Doom for the 32X, and I'll tell you why this is far from the worst version of the game. My first impression of Doom was complete visceral excitement. I had never played anything so violent, so tense, and so incredibly versatile. Here is a game that allowed you to pretty much go anywhere while throwing monsters at you left and right. The guns had been fun too, everything from a chainsaw to a plasma gun to smite your demonic foes. Perhaps the most amazing thing I found was just how easy Doom was to play. After nearly 20 years of primarily 2D games, you think there would be a major adjustment to running around in a first-person world. That was not the case at all. Doom on the 32X made use of Sega's 6-button controller, so you had a button to fire your weapon, a button to run, a button to interact with switches and doors, and a button for your map. The final 2 buttons allowed you to scroll through your weapons forward and backwards. The button you used for opening doors also had a secondary function that allowed you to strafe left and right to avoid enemy fire. Outside of that, this is Doom, and you guys have played it a million times. The labyrinthian levels are huge and loaded with enemies, secret areas, weapons, and keycards to access the exit so you can move on. Each door, switch, and major item you interacted with often opened up areas that flooded you with enemies. It was a heck of a good time, easy to play, and if you enjoyed killing things violently, it scratched that itch and then some. Since all of you have played Doom at some point in your lives, the more interesting aspect of this is how it performs visually. As you can see, 2 things are immediately obvious. First, it's not full screen, and second, it's not particularly smooth. These 2 attributes are directly connected in fact, with Sega shrinking the screen a bit to deal with performance drops in the more complicated areas. Since I had never played any other version at that point, these issues didn't really bother me, nor did the fact that the enemy sprites are only rendered with their front-facing animations. Also of note is the pared back stage design in some of the larger areas. What you really want to know is how does this perform next to other console versions? I'll spare you and not compare it to the PlayStation version. That one looks, runs, and plays better full stop. Even the musicless Jaguar version spanks it pretty hard visually. This often leads many to think that this is the worst home port visually, but I strongly disagree. The 3DO version was released much later in 1996 and runs significantly worse. Side by side, the 32X version runs unquestionably better. I know the 3DO Doom has its own story about why it runs the way it does, but the end result is the 32X provides a more playable experience. Perhaps even more shocking, the Sega Saturn version runs quite a bit worse when viewed side by side as well. This is double the case when you're entering larger rooms, where the Saturn typically tanks to almost unplayable levels. I really do feel that despite its shortcomings, you could definitely do worse in regards to visuals with other versions of this game. Besides, the 32X has much bigger problems elsewhere. With Sega of America directly involved in the development process, they were responsible for the music. It was done by Brian Coburn, who had worked on titles like Sonic Spinball, Echo the Dolphin, and a bunch of Sega CD titles like Batman Returns and Spider-Man. Despite his impressive body of work, the music here is just terrible. I know that Jim's driver didn't always sound terrible, but it certainly does here. Sega chose not to use the 32X additional sound hardware at all, and instead let the Genesis handle it by itself. This extremely bad showing is a major letdown for those of us who know the Genesis can do better, and expected more from our new 32-bit edition. For what it's worth, the poor Jaguar version doesn't have any music at all. Here are a few samples, but be warned, you might want to turn the volume down a bit. As I mentioned earlier, much of the focus on the ports of Doom center on its visuals version to version. The 32X catches a ton of flack because it's not full screen and it doesn't run super smooth, but there are much worse playing versions of Doom in this regard. The truth is, Doom on the 32X had a number of problems that were far more damaging to its legacy than how it looked. I already mentioned the awful music, but there's more. Much more. Doom on the PC had come in episodes. 3 of them in fact. The first was called Knee Deep in the Dead, the second The Shores of Hell, and finally Inferno. The 32X Doom had episodes 1 and 2, but completely omits Inferno. But that isn't the worst of it. While episode 2 is here, Sega cut out the 8th map, which was the battle with the Cyber Demon, and one of the coolest maps in the entire game. The missing 3rd episode also had the Spider Demon boss, which is of course not here, meaning that both of the main boss battles are completely absent. Other irritations include the maps being shuffled a bit and episode 1's military base map actually being a secret level in the 32X Doom. The Spectre enemy, a transparent version of the Pinky Demon, has also been completely cut out. And finally the BFG 9000, the most powerful weapon in the game, is completely absent during normal gameplay and needs a cheat to be unlocked. This also lacks any form of save or password feature, so you need to beat it start to finish in a single setting without using cheats to see the real ending. It also, of course, is completely missing any form of multiplayer. While I will say again that I was blissfully ignorant of these cuts and aberrations back then, I can't simply pretend like they don't matter. Firing this version up today means you are missing a shed load of content, including the epic boss battles, and that sucks no matter how you try and frame it. Like a lot of games and systems in this hobby, I find myself of two minds about Doom on the 32X. Despite being developed in tandem with the Atari Jaguar version, the 32X game beat it to market by a week, making it the first console port available to the public. It was the first time I had ever owned it myself, and not knowing any better, I absolutely loved it. It wasn't the first time I had seen the first-person perspective in a video game, but it was the first time I had seen it so violent and with such incredible visuals. For that reason, I will always hold a special place in my heart for the 32X Doom despite its shortcomings. I tend to want to defend it against criticism about its graphics because I believe there are far worse options out there. But with Sega cutting the cart size to a mere 24 megabits, the loss of content definitely takes a toll. There are so many ways to play Doom now, so many mods to explore, so much extra content to find. With this one missing so much of the base experience, it's a tough recommendation beyond its historical significance and your fading memories of it as a kid. On the plus side, for you dedicated Sega fans that must have a go at everything, there are hacks available that restore much of the content that Sega cut out, and even adds the levels from the Ultimate Doom episode, Thy Flesh Consumed. It's still missing some stuff and some of the larger areas run like complete ass, but it's an interesting hack all the same. If you are still rocking a 32X or just want to try it out on an emulator, it's definitely worth a look. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.